Welcome, everybody. My name is Claire Nichols, and I'm the president of the Upper Kittitas County Community Recreation Center Alliance, UCCRCA for short. We are a newly formed not-for-profit, and our mission is to engage the community to design and build a recreation center that is responsible, sustainable, and delivers programs and activities the community values. Our community has expressed interest in a recreation center for the past several decades, specifically with interest for kids and teens, seniors, and families. They've said, give us a place to gather indoors all year long. And I think it's especially relevant given the excessive amounts of snow we're currently dealing with. Recently, 12 acres of land and $4 million has been secured that really makes this dream possible. And you can feel the momentum in the community. It's exciting right now. Our group is in the process of conducting a feasibility study. You may remember a survey in August or September of 2021 asking what you'd like to see in a community recreation center. We took your input and are now coming back with some examples of what we could build and rough estimates of how much each of the options would cost, and we're asking for input once again. After you weigh in, we will present an option that best reflects all of the feedback we receive, with the focus being a facility that the community is willing to pay for. With your help, we could be breaking ground in a year or two. Please help us by taking the survey. You can find the link on our Facebook page, which is @RecreationUKC, or on our website, recreationukc.org. If you're interested in learning more about the 3 options in the survey, how the funding and budgeting was calculated, or the general process we're undertaking, please keep listening. Today, I'm here with Melissa Becker, UCCRCA project manager, and members of our project team, Ray Johnston and Jen Kriegel from Johnston Architects, and Ken Ballard of Ballard King, national firms that focus on feasibility and business planning for community recreation centers and pools. So let's start by explaining what these options are the community is weighing in on in the survey.
What are design alternatives? They're a set of options for a project. We listened to the community about what they wanted and came up with 3 options for a rec center that respond to community interests in slightly different ways and also work from a design perspective. After we get feedback from the community about these 3 options, we'll come back with a preferred alternative based on what people liked most about the initial 3.
I think one of the key things with this is the fact that that preferred option may very well be some type of a modification to one of the existing. We won't be starting over with a whole new option, but it should be a natural outgrowth from one of those 3 options that we're be presenting.
Thanks, everyone. Let's talk about what's different about each option.
First and foremost, these 3 options were created based on the input we received from last summer's survey and our interviews with various local organizations. All 3 options fit nicely on the 12-acre site near the Cle Roslyn schools, and all 3 options include adequate parking for the size of the facility. Most importantly, all 3 options have a pool because that was the #1 amenity the community said they wanted.
All right, well, let's start with option A, alternative A, and we'll show you first the site plan. Here you see the 12 acres. And the colorful spot to the upper corner on the right there is the gym on the left and a pool on the right in blue with support facilities in yellow. You'll see that in all of the graphics. This option includes a 4-lane pool and a recreation pool area adjacent to it and a hot tub. The gymnasium is suitable for basketball and pickleball, and there are additional fitness facilities as well as the parking that Melissa mentioned.
Option A represents the minimum that we felt would address the primary wants expressed by the public. It's important for the public to know, however, that the consultants advised our team that a standalone pool facility is not a good idea from an economic perspective. Pools have a very high cost to construct and maintain and relatively low levels of revenue from user fees and other sources.
And here you see that layout in a little bit more detail. Alternative B adds some other facilities we heard interest in. including an indoor walking or jogging track, a covered turf play area, a splash pad, and multi-purpose rooms. In this climate, the covered turf field would allow teams to practice outdoors all year long, and the jogging track would help people who like to walk and stay active in the winter. There you can see that jogging track wrapping around the other facilities and the covered turf area off to the left.
Extras that are included in option B weren't the topmost priorities expressed in the surveys, but we wanted the public to see the incremental costs of a few of these add-ons and decide whether or not they wanted to help us incur these costs now, or perhaps add them in at a later date. In the long run, waiting's more expensive, but there may be a limit to what the public is willing to help us fund today.
So alternative C adds a couple lanes to the lap pool, 4 acres of soccer and junior baseball fields, and additional attendant parking. The 2 lanes bring the pool up to a 6-lane facility, which makes it suitable for swim meets. The other 2 alternatives really are more recreational in terms of the swimming pool.
Option C, the project committee wanted to give the public the opportunity to see and to assess the cost of a complete build out of the entire 12 acres, what our community space might look like if it was completely developed. Again, it might be less expensive in the long run to build everything now, but we need to find out if the public wants to help us meet these costs at the present time. So as you go and look at these options, to some extent, for each option, we can add or take away elements. We can also start with the smaller option now and add more facilities and outdoor amenities in the future. Ultimately, we need you, the community, to again provide your input by taking the new survey. This time you'll have some defined options with cost information. Your input will tell us what you want and what you're willing to help us pay for.
Thanks, you guys. Those graphics were great. When we think about costs, we have to consider both capital and operating costs, as well as how a center can be funded. When folks are taking the survey, they'll see the range of costs that we're looking at, but a lot goes into calculating those numbers. Jen, what can you tell us about the capital costs of building a recreation center?
Okay, so capital costs refer to the cost of designing and constructing the building and its site. The estimate is based on the real cost of similar facilities currently under construction, which have been adjusted for inflation. For this project, costs were developed with the input of DCW, who are professional estimators and who are able to make sure the numbers we're using are realistic. We calculate costs for both construction and design based on project size, and DCW helped find current real costs of construction per square foot of building area. For the building, we calculate construction costs based on square footage. Each type of space at a building has a different typical cost per square foot. There's a substantial difference between storage space, which is the lowest cost to construct, and the pool, which is the highest cost. We divided each alternative into its different components, the different types of spaces it contains. So there's storage spaces, offices, locker rooms, the gymnasium, and the pool. And in the case of alternatives B and C, we also included the walking track, covered turf field, and splash pad. We figured out how large each type of space needs to be, and then multiplied the square footage of that space by the typical cost per square foot to build it. Add each area together and you get the cost to construct the entire building. For the site, we used a similar method and figured out the cost based on the size of the site. The cost to construct parking is based on the number of parking stalls, and in alternative C, the development of the athletic field is also included. The combined cost of site development and building construction gets us the construction costs, and we added a 10% contingency to this, just in case there are any surprises. Finally, we have to add the cost of design and other soft costs to the building. These costs are typically 30% of the construction costs. Design and soft costs include taxes and fees for architects, engineers, and other experts. The total estimated capital costs that you see on the website include all of these numbers. It is the total cost of designing and constructing the recreation center.
Thanks, Jen. That was really thorough and it makes sense. So Ken, once a building is constructed, can you explain how operating costs are determined?
Certainly, there's actually two parts to this equation. There's the cost of operation, which really is just your day-to-day expenses to operate and maintain the building, minus any debt service. That's not included in operating costs. And the other part we'll talk about in a second is revenue that's generated as well. So we talk about operating costs, there's really four areas. Staffing being the greatest one, and that's both full and part-time staff, and that can often represent 60 to 70% of an operating budget. So it's a large part of a budget for maintaining and operating a center. And so we want to be careful that we're estimating that accurately for what it's going to take to maintain this facility and provide the service that the public's expecting. One of the other areas is operating supplies, and that's everything from office supplies to maintenance supplies to recreation program supplies. It includes things like your pool chemicals and those types of things that are in there as well. That's generally a reasonably small percentage of your operating budget, maybe 10 to 15%. Contractual services, the other big piece, and almost all of that is made up of utility costs. And that's for heating and cooling the building. It's for circulating the water in the pool, lighting, all of that goes into that. And so that's next to staffing, the other biggest cost, and that's sometimes going to be 20% or more of your operating budget itself. There's other factors that go into contractual costs, such as everything from alarm services and mechanical system maintenance, a lot of other things that are actually paid for on a contract basis. And finally, the third piece is what we call capital replacement. And that's where we're putting money into the budget for things that are kind of unforeseen that happen. And that's things like we lose a pool pump, and we have to replace that. We may lose a lighting system or something. And so it's costs that we have to incur over the course of a year just to keep the building operating. In our first few years of operation, that's generally very low to nothing. But as we get older into the building, 3, 5 years and beyond, now it starts to go up. And so we want to allocate dollars from the very beginning for that. So those are operating costs. So the other side of this then are revenues. And this is what we really call earned income. And that's dollars that are coming into the facility through people that are using the facility itself. And this is based on a fee schedule that's developed for use of the facilities, for programs and services, and for rentals. And so our dollars come in those particular areas, admissions being the greatest source of most revenue for the facility. And that's drop-in usage of the facility itself, where people are coming in to swim, maybe using the gym space, maybe using the outdoor turf field, that type of thing as well. And next to admissions, the next biggest revenue source is programs and services that take place in that facility that people will be charged fees, things like swimming lessons, and those types of programs. And so revenue comes in from that source. And then finally, we have rentals to outside groups, rentals to the general community, rentals to other providers of services. And that can be a significant amount of money as well, but usually not the size of admissions or programs. So once we have that estimated, the reality is that the revenues themselves cannot cover the cost of operations. So there's a difference between those two. And that difference is what we call the subsidy. And the amount of subsidy, the dollars are going to have to be, in a sense, paid for in some way, shape, or form from some other source to make up the difference between those two. This is not unusual. Most public recreation centers across the country operate usually with a significant subsidy level involved. So this is a normal process for a public recreation center. So that's probably a good segue to start talking about the funding piece of this and how do we deal with this. Claire mentioned earlier, we have some dollars already in place for this that have about $4 million, and that's kind of through some fundraising efforts and others, and that will be one of the sources we'll be looking at. But a big part of the capital will have to come through a bond, likely for the facility itself, and that will have to be supported through tax dollars. And then that operational shortfall, that subsidy level, will have to be financed as well. And that really usually comes through a tax levy. And then the premise at this point is that this is probably going to occur through some type of a parks and recreation district. That would be the major funding mechanism that would raise the tax dollars to build and operate this facility. But we're looking at other forms of funding as well, other ways to mitigate the total amount of dollars that have to come through taxes. And that can be through the fundraising efforts, through state and federal dollars that would be available, and also through grants. And we've kind of identified those for the capital side. Operationally, grants as well can be available for that. Partnerships that may occur with other providers will help oftentimes offset some of the cost of operation, and agreement with other agencies, whether they're other public agencies, nonprofit, or others, could also help with this process as well. So we've kind of looked at all of those different aspects of operating and maintaining a facility to bring a project forward that, again, you will understand what the costs are going to be and what the revenue potential for this facility will be as well.
Thanks, Ken. That was a lot of good information, and I'm going to attempt to summarize here what you just said. So I think I heard that we'll need a bond to cover construction costs beyond what we can fundraise for, as well as an operating levy to cover the operating subsidy.
That's true.
There are going to be user fees for folks who use the center, as well as some scholarships to make sure everyone has access, because that's important.
That's absolutely
And
true.
all of this information, as well as cost ranges, is presented on the UKC website, which is recreationukc.org, and it's going to be summarized in the survey. And that's where we really want to hear from the community about all these things that we've just talked about. Melissa, when is this all happening?
I know everybody's super excited to get this thing built and start swimming, but we still have a lot of work to do. The survey, first of all, will open for the community's input around January 24th, and will close in mid to late February. After we close the survey, it'll take about 2 or 3 weeks to review the responses and consolidate them into a preferred option with its related construction and operating costs. We hope to have this preferred option reported back to the public in mid-March. This would essentially mark the completion of the feasibility study that we started last summer. We would know what the community wants, what it would cost, and an indication of whether the community appears to be prepared to fund its proposed portion of the cost. From here, if the public has indicated that it does want to move forward, there are at least 3 primary activities that would need to be done. We'd need to begin the detailed architectural design of the preferred option. We'd need to begin a capital campaign to raise public and private money to help fund construction. And we'd have to execute all the steps needed to pass the levies that would help us fund both construction and operations and maintenance. These 3 major activities would likely take us at least to the end of 2022, so that we could possibly begin construction in 2023. So an aggressive timeline, but that's what we're shooting for.
Well, we'd love to help you really fulfill the potential of this wonderful site. And this is just a hint at what you might see as you approach through the forested 12 acres that we have to work with. It's very exciting. We look forward to its evolution.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panel of experts, Melissa, Ken, Ray, and Jen. Really appreciate your expertise and time. Thank you to everybody who stuck with us through this presentation. We hope you found it informative. Please take the survey linked to our Facebook page at Recreation UKC, or go to our website, recreationukc.org, to take the survey. If you have any questions, you can reach us at hello@recreationukc.org. Thank you very much, and we hope you have a wonderful day.